Hello, everybody. I'm Tarah Wheeler. I'm CEO of Red Queen Dynamics, and this is Cybersecurity Office Hours, where we talk about questions that face small businesses and the managed service providers that love them, and how we can start solving some of the serious problems facing SMBs and the bottom half of the United States business market. And for all of the fascinating questions involving the regulatory world and the issues facing small businesses and cybersecurity, there's a lot of human stories behind them and a lot of problems we love to tackle. So we're here today for you. I brought you, I'm this is like show and tell. I brought you the incredible and amazing Wendy Nather. Today I'm going to introduce her in just one second, just to say, anytime you have questions today, no matter who you are, we want to know. We want to see those questions. This is office hours, and it is intended to be for you, for the community, to get a chance to ask us anything that you want. She's smarter than me. I expect you to direct more questions to her. But let me go ahead and tell you about who today's guest is. Wendy Nather leads the Advisory CISO team at Cisco. She was previously the research director at the retail ISAC and research director of the information security practice at 451 Research. Wendy led IT security for the EMEA region of the investment banking division of Swiss Bank Corporation, which is now UBS. And she served as CISO of the Texas Education Agency. She was inducted into the InfoSecurity Europe Hall of Fame in 2021, well deserved. Wendy serves on the advisory board for Sightline Security and is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Cyber Statecraft Initiative. And more than that, she is a friend, a mensch, an incredible person, and one of the most beloved figures in information security. She's a hero, and I'm so proud and grateful to call her a friend. What I do want to note is that the thing we're here to talk about today is the security poverty line. Wendy came up with this concept in 2011, and it's been rehashed, talked about, filched a couple of times by people who didn't know what they were talking about a few times in the interim. And what I would love to do today is talk about how the lack of resources and the other elements of the security poverty line that Wendy's going to talk with us today a little bit about impact especially the businesses and organizations in this country that don't have enough resources to handle the security questions and problems that plague them on an everyday basis. So, Wendy, thank you so much for being here. I would love to hear what you have to say, and I'd love also if we can hear it, from the lion's mouth herself, about what are the four elements of the security poverty line and how you think they're going to begin impacting and have been impacting small businesses and managed service providers in the United States.
Oh, thank you so much, Tara. It is great to be here, and I always love talking with you. So I started thinking about the idea of the security poverty line, as you said, in 2011, because around that time or earlier, I started working for the Texas Education Agency. It was my first day on the job. I was the only dedicated security person, and I walked in the first day, and they said, "We need your budget request by the end of the day today." So I wrote down, I asked for $2,000. I wanted a logging server and a couple of books. And the person I was reporting to at the time scribbled it out and said, "Where do you think you are, the private sector?" So I had zero people, zero budget, nothing at the time. And this should make it clear that we're not just talking about the private sector when it comes to this problem. It is well known in state and local government, sometimes even in federal government. The problem is that if you're a CISO who has to deal with this, you can't get up on a stage and talk about this. You can't say, we're having these problems. But whenever I do talk about it, people will come to me afterwards and go, "Yeah, that's us. Don't tell anybody." So I feel it's important for somebody to talk about it, because people should know that you cannot do what we're seeing on stage at DEF CON and Black Hat and RSA and all these things from financial institutions and big tech companies. What they're doing in security is impossible. And here's why. So I divided it into four categories. Obviously, number one is money, because yes, you need the money, but money is not enough. And it's like I said, I asked for $2,000 and it was turned down. And we'll talk a little bit later about what we think security actually costs, how much you would really need to be able to achieve what we think of as good security. The second thing is expertise. And By expertise, I don't just mean sending people to a training course, because that's the easy answer that a lot of people come up with is, oh, we're going to give them free training and we're going to certify them and that's going to fix all the problems. No, because expertise means also having the skills and the experience to be able to know what to do with something you've never seen before, because that's our lives in security, right? It's every day we're like, wow, that just happened. Okay, now what do we do? So you can't just go to a course and then come back and deal with all the security issues that your particular business might have. And also, expertise is very, very expensive. You are competing to hire people. You're competing with vendors who can afford to pay a lot more. Security vendors, yeah, Cisco's one of them. And so, what are you supposed to do as a small business owner? The third is capability. So even if you know what you need to do, are the constraints in your environment keeping you from doing it? For example, if you say, we don't run our own network, you can't be putting firewalls in or whatever. So half of the advice on network security is not going to be possible for you. um, I'm sure we'll talk at some point about safety versus security. If you're in healthcare, you are not going to let any of your authentication fail closed. You are not going to ever lock out your medical workers from accessing a system that will help them help the patients. It's just not going to happen. So capability is another thing, what you can and can't do. And then finally, influence. When I was at TEA and I would go to a small vendor business and say, there's a problem with this software, you need to fix this security flaw. They would either say to me, well, you're the only person who's complained about this, so we're not going to fix it. Or they're going to say, well, we'll fix it if you pay us to fix it. So if you're a small business and you need your suppliers to step up and provide secure software, it's not the same as if you're Cisco and you can go to, any vendor and go, yeah, we need you to fix that. And they'll go, oh yeah, right away. Sure. So those are the things: money or budget and expertise, capability, and influence. So those are the different dimensions of security poverty that I think we should be addressing.
Mhm. It's so helpful to have you bring
And
that up
I'll turn it
because,
over to you
yeah.
now, Tara.
It's so helpful to have you bring that up and specifically about the difference between safety and security. It's something that we often think about as you and I have both seen kind of the top and the bottom of security, and yet we're often in this world where we in enterprise security, cutting edge information security, the most we get annoyed about is healthcare and how a lot of medical equipment must fail open, as Wendy has said. So that difference between safety and security, where safety means that human life is being preserved, and security means that data is being secured according to usually the CIA triangle: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The problem is that for people that deal with physical elements of the economy, not people sitting in front of a computer all day long, that safety comes into greater and greater focus when you're operating a truck, when you are running farm equipment, when you are trying to get goods from one end of this country to another, with all of the various physical interconnected systems we deal with. At that point, it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people to take information security seriously when the choice is making sure that somebody's data is protected or keeping somebody's leg attached. So that's something that is still part of the long tail of a major attack that happened in 2017 called WannaCry, which caused
Yep.
the UK's National Health Service to shut down for 3 weeks. Good actuarial estimates think that about 300 people died in that attack. The history of that is long, and I'm more than happy to bend everybody's ear over it. But a good estimate by Security Boulevard in, I think, 18 months ago is that by now about 20% of the companies that were vulnerable to WannaCry in 2017 still are, and many of them are healthcare organizations that still have Windows 7 machines they can't update because the vendors of their
Right.
medical equipment have not provided security updates. How do we deal with this conflict between safety and security, when people look at you just crazy when you say you need to prioritize your information security, when they're like, I'm trying to put a guy's heart back together. What do we do about this, Wendy?
It is scary, and I have to say, since I said we were going to be live screaming today, let's do some screaming. It really ticks me off when I see the armchair quarterbacking comments all over social media going, "Why didn't they just, whatever." I'll tell you another great story. I'd heard a story about a manufacturing shop floor laser that was rumored that if you did any security scans of the network that it was on, it would trigger the laser to turn 180 degrees and fire. And so I said, I don't know if this is true or not, but it's a great story. And, I would tell a story at talks. And then one day somebody from the audience came up to me later and said, I was there. It happened. And I went, oh my God. So, anything the usual people sitting behind keyboards, as you said, or people, um, whose career in information security is not actually making security work day to day, but building things or instructing or consulting or writing about or researching, really do not understand, the visceral, frightening reaction of imagining, yeah, no, you can't scan this at all, or that there are so many answers where it's just no, that is not going to happen for very good reasons. And like I said, I think part of it is we need to talk about it more. And luckily, there are more and more organizations that are stepping up to do this. There are cyber civil defense clinics that are cropping up, usually around universities, where they give the CS students and the cybersecurity students some practice by letting them run a clinic where small businesses come in and say, look, I have this problem. And a small project that these students can take on is doing something like implementing multi-factor authentication. And that's when these students are going to learn, oh, you can't just do it the way the book says, or the way the training taught me, or whatever. There is always some reason or some constraint that you have to work around. So the more people that can learn what the real world thing is, the more I think we will make some progress on this. But I'm pretty convinced that we do not understand the extent of this problem. It's a complex problem, just like regular poverty is. And yeah, I think that it's going to be as difficult as solving climate change, or doing healthcare reform in the United States, where the problem is economic and cultural and social and political, not just technological. And so I think it's going to take a lot of work.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Not only that it's a complex problem, that it's about the resources we dedicate to it, but also what organizations are part of solving this problem.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I grew up in rural Oregon, and some organizations that loomed really large in the more rural areas, agriculturally focused small businesses that often required something like an SBA loan, or they were working with the extension school for OSU for ag or something along those lines. There were organizations that were part of small business life that I recall. And a little while ago, I started looking around and I asked myself this question: where the hell is the Small Business Administration in the process of helping small businesses figure out what they're supposed to be doing for cybersecurity? I mean, they publish standards for how best to do your taxes, they make recommendations, they make financial standards available to small businesses. There's certainly, and certainly over the course of my life in more rural areas in the United States, that the SBA is a lifeline for small businesses. But Wendy, I did a little bit of research over the course of the last couple of days. I'll do that anyway for fun
Uh-oh, here
because
we go.
nerd.
Here we go.
But so I took a look at this, and I'll put the links up in the chat here as we do this. For 2023 and 2024, there's about a year span of time. There was an announcement that was just made by the Small Business Administration. They're so excited about it. This next year, they are beginning their first pilot program to help small businesses with cybersecurity. And the budget for this program is $6 million. Uh, yeah, the SBA, by their own numbers, has counted was it 33,185,550 total small businesses in the United States, which works its way out to 18.1 cents per American small business that the SBA is going to be spending on cybersecurity for a year. I don't think that is reflective of taking the impact of cybercrime and technological innovations with the problems that come with it seriously. I just don't think it's taking it seriously. What do you think about this?
My first thought when you said that is to think, well, they've got to be thinking about concentrating that funding, not just, handing out an 18.1 cent check to every small business. So they've got to be concentrating. They've got to think that there are centralized points where they can make a bigger impact by deploying that money. But my question is where and how do they think that is going to help? Now, you might see organizations with hierarchical, assistance centers, where people can go, like those clinics, or like regional service centers, like we had for the K through 12 uh, districts and campuses in Texas, where they could go and, if you sent money to that regional service center, they might be able to use that amount of money. But it is hard enough to figure out what security actually costs. Now, for a small business, for a large business. Now, when I was an industry analyst, I decided to do some research, and I went to a bunch of professional security people, and I said, okay, here's the scenario. I'm a CISO. It's my first day on the job. It's an organization with 1,000 people. They've never done security before. What should I buy? That's it. What should I buy? I didn't try to lead them or anything. I said, name what you think is a bare minimum. And I got so many different answers. Some people named 4 different technologies, and they said that's the baseline. Some named 31 different technologies. And you can imagine that those people work for a bank, because you can afford a little bit of everything. So, it's a huge, wide variety of technologies that security professionals, very experienced ones, felt that you needed to have, that you needed to start with. So I normalized all of that. And it's sort of the Leicester requirements of the controls sort of lined up pretty much with PCI DSS, with the data security standard for the payment card industry. And then I took that as a shopping list, and I went around to vendors and I said, I'm an organization with 1,000 people. I need to get one of these, whatever they said. I need to get firewalls. I need to get antivirus. I need to get this and that and the other. What does it cost? And they said, well, it depends. And they wouldn't tell me, because a lot of vendors do not put any prices on their websites. You need a 2-hour sales meeting first with them before they can even start to tell you what it might cost. Not to mention how much it costs to get people to run that infrastructure, and figuring out whether you're going to get, like free open source software and then just spend only on people to run it, or whether you're going to go to an MSP, or whether you're going to go to one favorite vendor and get services from them, or whatever. It varies widely again. So the bottom line was, if you're a CISO sitting there in front of a blank Excel spreadsheet, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is my budget really going to be? You could be off by as much as a factor of 4 trying to figure out what it will cost you before you start buying anything. So that's another really big problem, I would argue. And please, I want people to argue with me in the comments, because I love a good knockdown, drag out comment. I don't think we even know how much security costs. We know what people are spending. We don't know whether that's right or wrong. We don't know if it works. We don't know how much security should be spent for anybody at any size, whether it's enterprise, whether it's SMB. So, okay, let's go. Let's fight this out.
Let's rock and roll in it, and it really does come down to the fact that we aren't sure how much security costs. That people are arguing in sometimes in a wind tunnel trying to figure this all out. We've already got some great questions, and I keep wanting to ask you questions, and I have like 4 of them ready to go. But let's go ahead and go to some of the really good questions that we've gotten here, and I want to make sure, we're thinking about this not just in terms of somebody who's a full-time employee in information security at their company, like a CISO. We're also talking about companies that have no internal information security or technology whatsoever. I mean, most companies below 100 people have no full-time IT staff, much less anybody who's in information security. I promise you, you cannot afford me or Wendy's hourly rate, right? And that's the problem, is how do we make this available to small businesses, and especially the managed service providers that often are the API to these small businesses? So
Yes,
I
yes.
love this question. It is I think it's Tiroli W possibly, coming from from YouTube, and the question is, how do we make security part of business process thinking and avoid the translation of security theory versus the practical issues and implementation? In their experience, security is an afterthought. This is a great question, Wendy. How do we make security part of business process thinking, even in businesses that don't have security internally? What do we do?
Yeah, and that's a problem. I mean, if you think about it from a business point of view, if you're a good business person, you are not going to spend any money that you don't absolutely have to. That's just, business sense. So of course, if you're an SMB and you're not sure you need something, you're not going to pay for it. What you're going to do is wait until hopefully just before you need it and then buy it when you have to. And that is a gap that most people just do not understand. It makes perfect sense. The trick with security is getting the timing right. Like, you don't buy it until just before you need it. So let's say that it would cost you, or I'm just spitballing here, a million a year to run a security program, and you put it off for 2 years. And then you have a breach and it costs you maybe $500,000. You came out ahead. You can't argue that. That's just math. You came out ahead by putting it off for 2 years. You saved money. This is what we cannot reasonably argue with by saying, oh, there are so many, everybody's either breached or they just don't know they are. I hate that. I hate that saying. That is so facile and it's stupid and it's wrong. So I if you come at it from a realistic business perspective and say, okay, there are things you're not going to need in security because you are not in that risk quadrant until you get to a certain size or you're doing certain things. If we could give them guidance and say, when you get to this size and you're doing this, like you're doing telephony, you're going to have to start worrying about telephony scams and people stealing things. So that's about this time, 18 months in or whatever, you're going to have to start addressing this because we have seen this in other similar organizations. This is when they start to get hit. And that can be understandable to the business owner and say, okay, first of all, I agree that I agree on the impact. But secondly, I also agree on the probability because I am seeing the hard data on this happening under the same circumstances to my peers. I'm more likely to believe that. I am more willing to maybe spend the money instead of waiting until just after it's too late, because that's where we see a lot of these SMBs getting hit is after it's too late. And then by then, again, this isn't just SMBs, this can be really large organizations that are under the security poverty line. I heard about one very large organization that told their incident responder after their IP was stolen, well, we're not going to spend money on security now because everything's gone. We've lost our IP. We've lost everything. There's nothing left to protect. Why would we spend money on this now? So we have to address that logic chain instead of just saying, well, here's regulation and you need to buy one of these and one of these, especially if we can't even tell them how much it's going to cost and whether they can afford it.
I
So I
love
don't
that.
know what would you add to that, Tarah?
Um, so for those that don't know so far, and for all the new folks that are joining us this week, hi, this is going to be regular. Let me complain about something right now, which is that I think there's only one form of teeth that exists out there, and that's cyber insurance right now, honestly and genuinely. for small businesses for building this into the business processes that I think it's Taroli W asked about. So we at Red Queen Dynamics have a product called Dyna. We use this is for managed service providers to help small businesses manage their continuous compliance questions, surveys, the kinds of things that you need to do to get into small businesses that don't necessarily have endpoints specifically that you could even protect. And it has been my experience in the thousands, I think, of conversations I've had at this point with principals of MSPs and small businesses that not one single small business I have ever encountered has ever bought cyber insurance because they wanted to be safer
Yeah.
or be insured. Not one of them. They only do it when it's revenue enablement. That is it. Either they have to keep making money from a partner who's now requiring it, or they can't get through a vendor assessment process from folk that are now requiring it, or they have some form of compliance element to get through. It honestly, it's just money. You can't do it unless it is something that is demonstrably going to make more money if you do this cybersecurity process. So it's going to continue to be an issue, but it's getting better for the businesses that are recognizing the value of doing continuous cybersecurity compliance, and just take a bite of the elephant every week. Don't try to eat the whole thing at once. So that's at
Yeah.
least part of the business process. Mm-hmm.
And another good way of thinking about this is relating this directly to the business imperatives. One group that does this really well is Sightline Security. I'm on the advisory board there, and they help nonprofits. And what they focus on doing is taking things like the NIST standards and translating them into non-technical language that is business relevant, mission relevant to what the nonprofit is doing. Like, what sorts of things would cause you not to be able to help, provide these services to these homeless people, or get the food banks out,
Mhm.
or to help victims of human trafficking? What would cause you to not be able to do this? Now let's look at what those specific security risks are, what might happen in your area. And if you sit down with them and say, what, and have them provide the answers, what sort of things are going to affect your mission? Then, first of all, if they give the answers, they're more likely to believe them. Secondly, they're more helpful to them, but they're also in the language that makes more sense to them. So, let's not roll out the stuff that we're used to reading from NIST or whatever, but having a much more down to earth, business specific discussion with them, and let them identify the risks that are most important to them. And if the risk of non-compliance and fines is a bigger risk to them and their business than hackers, because it's a lot easier for them to believe in the auditor. They've seen the auditor. If compliance is the one biggest risk they want to manage too, okay, that's great, that's fine. But we have to be aware of what's really relevant to them, not just what we believe. Everybody one size fits all risk scenario is going to be out there.
It's precisely that, and the idea that we're matching the resource availability, the training, and our capacity to translate in cybersecurity to the person that you're interfacing with. So James Byerly, who runs not only a dear friend but also the principal of Secure Point Solutions out of Iowa, wonderful managed security service provider, says the office manager with a 20-year-old minor in computer science just trying to hold a network together needs some help, right? This is a typical kind of
Mhm.
person that I know this managed security service provider helps, and is often the kind of company that is a client of the MSPs that we work with. There's one person inside this small business, 60 people maybe. There's one office manager. How does that person keep a network together? How do we help that person when they've got such outsized responsibilities for information security and so few resources with which to do it?
Yeah, that is really tough. Or in state and local government, when they're using historically underutilized businesses, those are typically not large companies, and they can't afford to provide the supply chain security that their customers need. It's a problem all the way down and all the way up. This is where I hope that we can put together villages, the equivalent of it takes a village to help with security. So programs like those cybersecurity clinics, but I worry that they are not going to scale very well because, as you were just
Mhm.
describing, I forget the number, but how many SMBs are there out there in the United States?
More
Lots,
than 33 million.
and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
ones that yeah, and ones in rural areas. I mean, the truth of the matter is we're all affected by cybersecurity today, no matter what we're doing, no matter how we're earning a living. And
This
so
is
we need to democratize security.
This goes absolutely great. This concept of building a village. Let me pull up Michael Olson's question here. This is wonderful. Are there opportunities for security practitioners to help SMBs besides being a vendor in the corporate world? How do you make a difference in your local community? How do we build those villages, Wendy?
Yeah. Like I said, there is an effort to do that. I know other practitioners who have gone to their local chamber of commerce and said, and given presentations and said, here's something you should know. Here's something, that's trending. Yeah, put that down right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was like, oh, I should be doing that right now. Damn. Okay, yeah.
yeah, yeah. That sort of reaching out. But again, I think we need a more systematic approach because there are always going to be groups falling through the cracks depending on where practitioners are able to reach out like this, where they have time. There are also liability issues. If you are putting your hands on somebody else's keyboard in a small business, is that a liability issue for them if something goes wrong? um so you can't just walk in and say, here, let me fix this for you. I know your cousin Bob was running this for the last 15 years, but cousin Bob is now retired and doesn't even remember what he put in anymore, so let me help you with this. I think a lot of it is, again, just from a scale perspective, centralizing services that are well defined and well understood, uh, and uh, and making those more secure so that large numbers of SMBs can rely on those. For example, you really do not need to be running your own email server anymore. There's not too much different about email where you can't just, use Office 365 or Gmail or, something else that's centralized, or running it through your MSP. You should not need to have that on premise. Payroll, we've been outsourcing payroll for decades. There's no reason why you should be trying to do that yourself. So we need to be identifying more functions that can be standardized and handed off and centralized and said, look, if you want to reduce your risk, don't try to run this yourself. So having those sorts of packages available for SMBs to say, look, we'll take care of this part of it for you, all of these things, because from a business perspective, there's nothing special about this that you need to do yourself. Encouraging more and more that I think would help.
hmm Jean Pollock from LinkedIn has this absolutely great point. And the issue is that many small businesses are hemmed in by customers and also regulations, right? In fact, there's a great point here, which is that once a small business is breached, they may not be insurable again, which is
Yeah.
such a horrible dilemma to be in the middle of. Do we get insurance and pay all this money and maybe not get a payout if something happens?
Right.
Or
Right.
once,
Yeah.
yeah, or once we have had a breach, we're then no longer able to be insured after that. And frankly, the reason that small businesses buy insurance really is that revenue enablement. This means they can't enter enterprise supply chains. They can't get through, Boeing's ExoStar portal or the Microsoft or Amazon partner portals, right? To become a provider to
Yeah.
any of those businesses. And let us not even get in to CMMC and the DoD's requirements for third-party suppliers for larger
Yeah.
contractors supplying the Department of Defense. Absolutely. What do we do about this sort of dilemma? Like, do we insure and then pay a lot of money and not be able to actually make any at the end of it or be protected? Or do we try to avoid this as long as possible because of the possibility we could find out that we've been breached and still not be able to stay in business? What do we do?
Well, the whole cyber insurance thing has not been solved. It is a mess, and cyber insurance underwriters, go ahead and go in the comments. I see you. Um, but
Yeah.
but the thing is that 25 years ago when I was working for Swiss Bank, I'd be interviewed by insurance providers. They would ask me a bunch of questions that were geared to try to determine how good our organization was at managing those security risks. And you know what? In a lot of cases, when I talk to people now, 25 years later, they are still hearing the same questions. Um, because you cannot ask about every single type of technology. Do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? That changes too fast. The most you can say is, do you know how to run a secure development lifecycle program? Show us some proof that you know how to do this. But you can't get into too many specifics. And the other problem is actuarial information for insurance is just not where it needs to be. And so, yeah, there's no guarantee anymore that there will be a payout, even if you get that risk transfer via insurance. So that's why I don't think that starting requiring insurance as a risk mitigator is practical at this point. Like you just said, it may not be affordable. It may not do what it's supposed to. The only thing it will do is give you market access, maybe, depending on. So I think we're going to, as we start rolling these sorts of things out through um, rules or regulation, I think we're going to see, let's say, a government agency coming back and saying, we just lost 75% of our providers that we're used to working with because they cannot afford this insurance. And that's when the problem's going to rear its head and say, okay, I guess we didn't really solve it with this. Um, I don't know. It is a problem that insurance itself is not going to be the answer. Even though we know that probably one of the places where it's most likely that anybody can enforce any kind of set of security controls is insurance or certain very well defined regulations or standards like PCI DSS. But that's not all that we need to help implement security. It's not just a matter of dodging the most prominent security risks, which are all being created by regulation. It's day to day stuff. So I don't have a good answer here. I'll just say that.
But this is what you said earlier, right? We don't get to come onto a broadcast for 45 minutes and solve anything with the word poverty in it, right? This is a complicated problem. And in some places,
Yes, you're right.
you know, there's not a good answer. And so I'm annoyed sometimes by the concept of a simple response to a complex question. And one of the things
Mhm.
that I just threw up here, I just put it up as a banner here, and I'm also going to go ahead and post it in the comments. If I had any one thing, and we got a few dozen people on this broadcast. This is wonderful, seeing this, and people are going to see this later on LinkedIn Live, on YouTube. But here's the thing: the FTC on October 27th just created a regulation, and this regulation is an update to the safeguards rule. What it requires is this: all non-banking financial institutions in the United States that experience a data breach of more than 500 customers must report that loss of data to the FTC in under 30 days. If they discover this breach, they have to report it. Now, here's the issue: non banking financial institutions constitute every small business in the United States, every business at all that processes credit transactions, stores credit card data. That means mortgage brokers, used car dealerships, payday lenders, retail shops, construction companies that do the in-house financing for your remodel of your kitchen, right? And here's the problem
Yeah.
we have. This, by the way, this regulation is going to come into force in 5 months, folks. It was published more than a month ago, and there's 180 days before it comes into effect. If I had one thing that I wanted everybody here to walk away with, it is this: this is a regulation that is a simple fix to a complicated problem. The word discovery is problematic in the regulation because it means that if you just don't know that you've been breached, how could you
If
possibly
you
have
don't
breach
look, then
oversight?
you won't know.
You
Yep,
don't look,
yep,
then you won't
that's
find it.
right.
So here's the
Yep.
question I have for you, Wendy. I mean, now that this is the case, how the ever loving hell does an 8-person used car dealership out in Auburn, Washington, protect themselves sufficient to the point that they'll never experience a data breach and then get targeted by the FTC with this regulation. I mean, we know that the process is the punishment for this, right? Like the FTC paying attention to you, that's not, Max, stop it. This is not a thumbs up situation. This is me gesturing emphatically. The, the we know this is something that small businesses cannot handle, right? Yeah, there we go. Cannot handle. But what's the answer to something like this? This is a simple, broad regulatory fix to a complicated problem, and I'm deeply concerned by it. What do you? I mean, what do you have to suggest to folks that are nervous about something like this? Honestly, make me feel better, Wendy. I'm terrified as shit by this. Like this is
Oh
bad.
God. Yeah, don't put this on me. Don't put this on me. So,
Explain yourself, yeah.
thinking about why, okay, first of all, and I know this is going to be a really controversial statement, but assume, let's give the FTC the benefit of the doubt and that there are some smart people thinking that there were some good things that they were going to accomplish by doing this, that they realized that there was a limit to what they could ask for. They thought that, just the scope of this particular regulation is going to accomplish some things. At the very least, when you're asking about reporting, one of your goals is to get more data so you can understand more of the problem. So you can go later and work on a bigger, more informed version of the problem. Because, we just don't know what's going on with these institutions right now because they're not reporting. But you're right, the incentivization to even look for a problem, chances are you are not going to get, you're not going to know that you've been breached until a third party informs you or a number of third parties inform you. And who's in charge of looking, or is it just that if they happen to discover it, they may come and say, hey, we think you've got a problem. And a really big problem that we have, there are some great, there's a great series of research reports from Scientia and Risk Recon, which is part of MasterCard, on the ripple effect of breaches. And if you remember the Blackbaud ransomware attack, there are a lot of people who haven't heard of Blackbaud, but it's a platform used by a lot of nonprofits. They found at last count that over 1,000 organizations were affected by that attack. 1,000 organizations felt ripple effects from that attack on that one organization. I think we are going to see when we're able to look and get that visibility, I think we will see those sorts of ripple effects coming from these financial institutions. And they may well be saying, what are some other linchpins in our society where we are going to see ripple effects that we don't even know about? The other scary thing from this report series, by the way, was that a really large number of organizations that were hit by these ripple effects had to cover the costs of that breach, even though it wasn't their breach. So that's the other thing that should be scaring small businesses. What if they have to pay the cost of a breach that, their non-banking financial institution got into? So trying to bring those sorts of things to light, it will probably work, but again, as long as the incentives align or there is some way to get around the fact that, yeah, the cheapest thing is if you don't look, you won't know, and if you won't know, you don't have to report. So yeah, what are we going to do there? What are the backstops that we're going to put in place there? Yeah, I don't know. Do we have any FTC people here on the?
That's a really good question. It's a good question. And I love the spirit behind something like this because there is not enough responsibility being taken by organizations that do have the power to prevent these kinds of data breaches and are not doing so. And almost certainly that's the intended target of something like this. But the issue in this regulation where there is no limitation on firm size means that I think there's going to be a real issue with transfer of liability to the managed service providers that are working with small businesses like this. I think it's going to make IT services and security services harder to get for those small businesses, just like it's getting harder and harder for them to get cyber insurance as a result of this. This is really creating a world where there are haves and have-nots in security. And that transfer of liability, or at least the requested and required transfer of liability over to managed service providers, additional checklists, additional compliance work, it's going to get expensive. So I think we're really seeing just this resource mismatch between the expectations of people who are victims of cybercrime when this happens, and the people that expect them to pay up in terms of data and responsiveness is just it's mismatched there. So it's rough. I'll give you one last question here from the audience because it's a good one, and then I have the last question that we're going to ask you on the broadcast today. This
First of
one,
all, before you say anything else, wait.
yeah.
Adrienne Sanabria, I see you.
What
Stop
do you
being smart.
It's definitely going to be one of the great folks in the community. Adrienne Sanabria is asking the question, and it's a good one, right? What if Excel was infiltrated and turned into malware? Wendy, I think I might have this one. What makes you think it hasn't already? Anyway,
yes,
continue.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I mean, the world's most popular business intelligence tool is Excel. It is. Thanks, Adrienne. I need to go drink now.
Yeah.
But my question for you is, so how are MSPs reacting to this? Those who know about this regulation, this upcoming thing, are they calculating any particular sort of impact on them?
It's been my that's a good question. I always want to keep the focus on you in this one, but I spent a lot of time looking at this problem. This is my day job, right? And from what I have been able to see, MSPs are already drowning in incoming GRC work, governance, risk, and compliance work from their small businesses already. They're using highly orchestrated. Sorry, but this is a phrase I've used repeatedly: highly orchestrated Excel sheets. So there you go, Adrienne. It's true, right? To do
Highly
one-offs for all of these
orchestrated
businesses.
malware.
Highly orchestrated something. This is highly orchestrated something. So they're using that, and they're experiencing additional costs because as small businesses requests for compliance increase, and often MSPs work on a flat rate basis or a retainer basis. This is an increased it's an increased demand, and it's an unpredictable demand. So MSPs are having a hard time with this one too, and they are the ones who are often both the provider of the service and the third-party certifier that the service has been provided, which provides a really interesting element for us to get into that question in future. But yeah, I'm seeing that the cost is there and a real concern for liability is there. And from at least 3 of my recent conversations with cyber insurance brokerage principals, like people who own cyber insurance brokerages and companies, MSPs are growing not just harder to, but near impossible to insure. That's not just cyber insurance. There's also beginning to be problems with professional liability, as professional liability and cybersecurity are tied together for MSPs.
That's right.
So it's complicated. Anyway,
it's complicated. I saw somebody just posted a question, red team versus blue team versus purple team in cybersecurity versus physical security pen testing. I would say that in the areas that we're talking about, being able to divide all those up is a luxury. You might have one person named Matt who is doing all of them. And actually I did when I worked for the state. I had one person named Matt. I would help him with the red teaming when it was time to do that. We would, look at something physical. Oh, did you know you could open that lock? Okay, let's go tell somebody. You have to do everything. So, I would say yes, all of the above, but you don't have the luxury to get that fancy with it. You have to savagely prioritize what you can possibly address and get done.
Savagely is a wonderful way to put it. And it sure cuts it down to the bone, right? It gets us to the things that we need more than anything else. And kind of as always, folks, if you're a little more new to security, if you're an MSP, if you're a small business just looking to do literally any 3 things, I'm gonna give you these last 3 points and ask Wendy the final question of the broadcast today. If you don't know what else to do, make sure that your home and work email password is different. Get multi-factor authentication, not just enabled, but enforced. Whoever you are, talk to whoever is handling that internally for your organization and tell them to go to O365 or Google Admin Workspace and make sure that MFA is not just enabled, but enforced for everybody. And finally, get a password manager. All right, get a password manager, have separate individual passwords that are managed in a password manager for all the accounts that you've got in the business. Other than that, like everything else starts to be a Pareto optimal problem at that point. But if you don't know what else to do those three things. And the last question. All right, Wendy, here's the fun one for you. If you weren't a cybersecurity professional and you could have without concern for money, if you could be doing any other job on earth right now, what's the job that you'd be doing if you didn't already do and hopefully love what you do now?
Gosh, that's a really good question. So when I was in, I think it was either middle school or high school, I took a career aptitude test. I don't know if they're still giving those, but you know, you do a whole long thing where they run you through all sorts of multiple choice things, and they have you like memorize, pretend numbers and syllables in a foreign language, and then repeat them back, and you know, all this kind of stuff. Went through all of this, and it told me that my career should be in the foreign service. And I thought, well, you know, okay, sure, you know, that's interesting. And it turned out I fell into tech, and that's what made money. But I was telling that to a colleague of mine at dinner one time, and I forget which city we were in, which country we were in at the time. But she said, you know, I think you're actually doing that. So maybe I am. I don't know, but that's the best I can come up with right now.
I think you are a person who brings other people together at dinner tables, at conferences with concepts and in a way that is making the world better. And it was been just a joy to have you aboard today and have this conversation with you, my dear friend. Thank you for the joy and the hope and for the acknowledgement that some of these problems we just don't get to solve right now without some trade-offs that are really uncomfortable. But that doesn't mean we didn't get to tackle a really hard subject today and hopefully provide a little bit of even just emotional support to the people that we know that are tackling these
Right,
problems every single day. Some of whom we got to talk to today, some of whom hopefully get to
right.
see this again. We're here always.
It is not your
Yeah,
fault. You are
it's not
not
fault.
stupid. You are not lazy. In fact, some of the fault is ours for not building the kind of security that serves you. So yeah, it is absolutely. We are here for you.
Mhm. Amen, sister. We'll follow up with folks in the comments. Please feel free to reach out. I know Wendy's on LinkedIn, on Mastodon. Is there any place else that you'd love people to reach you at, Wendy?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm trying to. I have so many slacks. Dear God, so many slacks. So
So many slacks. All right. Folks, reach out. Let us know if there's ever anything that we can do to help. I'm going to go ahead and give you the ability to reach out to me at any time that you want to. I am at Tarah at redqueendynamics.com. And if you want help with any of this stuff, would you please just let me know? I will always give you a hand. I'm going to try to make this a little bit better, just like Wendy's doing. And I think, it's like Mr. Rogers said, right? Look for the helpers. We'll do
mhm.
the best we can, and not your fault, but we're glad you're part of our community. Thank you so much, Wendy. What a great day this is. Such a pleasure, my friend. All right, we'll see you folks
Take
again
care.
soon. Bye just for now.